Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. June 1st, 2025, Wenatchee, Washington, a town known for its orchards and quiet neighborhoods. But on this Sunday morning, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was suspicious. Three young girls were missing, their mother pacing her driveway alone, holding on to hope that had already started to slip. This wasn't a custody mix-up. This wasn't a scheduling oversight. This was the start of something deliberate. The facts began, as they often do, with a visitation agreement. Friday, May 30th, 2025, 32-year-old Travis Decker picked up his three daughters, Peyton 9, Evelyn 8, and Olivia 5, for a scheduled weekend visit per Chelan County court orders. The exchange took place at 5:01 p.m. at a neutral drop-off location. Whitney Decker, the mother, expected them back by 8:00 p.m. that same night. She never got a confirmation text. She never got a call. She never got her children back. By 8:35 p.m., Whitney had already called Travis. No response. By 9:10 p.m., she tried again. No voicemail. The phone went straight to silent termination. At 9:23 p.m., she made contact with local police to file a concern. Not a panic, not yet. But she was clear. She told dispatch that this wasn't a miscommunication. "He's never late without texting. I think something's wrong." Police noted that Whitney had previously expressed concerns about Travis's mental stability. Court records from their 2022 divorce showed she had submitted documents alleging signs of untreated PTSD and erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, paranoid claims, and increasing detachment. Yet no legal injunction had been granted to restrict his access to the children. The visitation agreement remained active and uncontested as of May 2025. Officers conducted a welfare check at Travis's last known address, a small rental home in East Wenatchee. He wasn't there. Neighbors hadn't seen him or the kids. His vehicle, a gray Dodge Ram 1500, was not in the driveway. Patrol units canvassed the area, contacted relatives, and issued an APB within Chelan and Douglas counties. But without signs of foul play, and with no direct threat identified, law enforcement could not issue an Amber Alert under Washington state protocols. Instead, the case was logged internally as custodial interference, high risk. Investigators flagged it for early Monday morning escalation if there were no contact by 10 a.m. Sunday. But Whitney refused to wait. She contacted the Wenatchee World News Desk. She posted online. She named her ex-husband publicly. The girls' school was notified. Flyers were printed. But within hours, concern gave way to something else. Dread. Because Saturday passed without any new information. Sunday morning, the girls didn't show up to the annual Fun Run for Families event, a local tradition they'd never missed. This wasn't a normal absence. Whitney knew it. She told police again, "If something bad happens, it's going to be this weekend." That afternoon, investigators pulled mobile location data from Travis's last known cell activity. His number had last pinged a rural cell tower near Plain, Washington on May 30th at 7:58 p.m. The signal died shortly after. There were no outgoing calls, no texts, and no mobile banking activity from that point forward. His online accounts went dark. The focus shifted to the Leavenworth region, a wooded mountainous area with spotty reception and over 120 square miles of dense state forest. Chelan County deputies began coordinating with Washington State Patrol and Fish and Wildlife units to begin targeted sweeps. Early patrols turned up nothing. No tire tracks off-road, no campsites disturbed, no signs of Travis or the girls. By June 2nd, the case was turned over to the FBI's Seattle field office under authority of the Federal Kidnapping Act, triggered by interstate flight risk. Forensic analysts requested surveillance footage from major gas stations and trailhead access points near Icicle Creek and Rock Island Road. A break came late in the day. At 5:42 p.m. on June 2nd, an off-duty wildlife officer noticed an abandoned gray Dodge Ram truck parked near Rock Island Campground, approximately 90 miles northeast of the initial pickup site. The vehicle was unlocked. Inside, 3 booster seats, a half-drunk coffee in the cup holder, and a crumpled pack of wet wipes. There was no blood, no struggle, but there was no sign of the girls. The vehicle was towed immediately for forensic processing. Investigators isolated partial shoe impressions consistent with small children near the passenger door. A single glove, adult-sized cotton, was found under the driver's seat. Forensic techs confirmed latent prints on the interior door handle. They belonged to Travis. But the glove? No match on file. It had no blood, no fibers. It was dry. Technicians noted a distinct absence of digital presence. The truck's onboard GPS system had been disabled. The in-dash infotainment system had been factory reset. The glove box contained no paperwork, no maps, no receipts, no wallet. There was one object worth noting, a park entry slip time-stamped for May 30th, 4:47 p.m., registered at the Leavenworth entry gate to Rock Island. The attendant recalled a quiet man with 3 young girls. "They were all asleep," she said. "He told me he wouldn't need the fire ring." That was the last confirmed sighting of the children alive. A formal federal warrant was issued that evening. Travis Caleb Decker, former Army intelligence technician, former National Guardsman, father of 3, was now a fugitive in a missing persons case involving minors. No charges had been filed yet. There were no bodies, but the search intensified. One detective privately voiced a concern. "It's too precise," she said. "No texts, no location data, no tracks. You don't get this kind of silence unless someone knows exactly how to make it." The Dodge Ram was towed at 6:18 p.m. on June 2, 2025. By 7:04, it was under lock in a secured forensic bay at the Chelan County Sheriff's Office. That night, the FBI's Seattle field office dispatched a mobile forensic unit. The priority wasn't the truck, it was the land surrounding it. By dawn, June 3rd, a Geogrid search began around Rock Island Campground. 5 miles in each direction were divided into 400-meter sections. Aerial drones with thermal imaging were deployed in cycles, overlapping human foot patrols. The search radius was dense with pine, elevation drops, and uneven terrain. Visibility was limited. What they were looking for wasn't yet classified as human remains, but everyone knew that was where this was headed. The forensic angle in this phase was geospatial behavior modeling. Travis Decker had military background, National Guard, Army intelligence rotation, several short-term deployments. He'd passed SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, escape training. He knew topography. That changed the assumptions. A typical suspect wouldn't disable their GPS. A former technician? He'd do it as step 1. FBI analysts constructed a probable flight radius using Travis's last ping near Plain, WA, and the park ranger's sighting at the Rock Island gate. Assuming a 2-hour margin between park entry and vehicle abandonment, the FBI defined a likely footprint of movement. The dogs were deployed based on that model, but nothing came up on thermal or canine sweeps within the first 24 hours. Then at 11:17 a.m., a Parks and Rec volunteer flagged a shallow impression 1.8 miles east of the site. No tools, no tent, just compression in the moss and a set of small tread patterns. Child-sized, off-angle, like someone had dragged something heavy but not dug in. Teams narrowed in. At 12:43 p.m., searchers found what they first assumed was a discarded trash tarp. It wasn't. Beneath the folds, in a half-covered depression near a dry creek bed, were 3 small bodies. Each was bound at the wrists using commercial-grade zip ties. Each had a clear plastic bag secured over the head with duct tape. The tape was uniform, clean. No fibers, no fingerprints. There were no signs of defensive wounds, no bruising on the arms, no blood. That part was deliberate. As one agent put it, this wasn't rage, this was method. Medical examiners were helicoptered to the site. Time of death was estimated within a 24 to 36-hour range from recovery, placing it roughly between the evening of May 30th and the morning of June 1st. Early autopsy notes confirmed cause of death: asphyxiation due to restricted airflow. No signs of sedation, no broken bones, no blunt force trauma. Each child was dressed in the same clothing they wore at pickup: Peyton in a lavender hoodie, Evelyn in a yellow t-shirt with a cartoon sunflower, Olivia in pink overalls. All items cataloged, no external cuts. Their faces had been wiped clean. The proximity of the site to a known wildlife corridor complicated evidence retention. Still, investigators found 2 key elements: a half-buried packaging stub for industrial zip ties, Home Depot brand, and a child's crayon drawing, soaked but partially legible. The sketch depicted a dog, three stick figures, and what appeared to be a gray truck. The evidence was preserved, documented, and transferred. But the site itself posed new forensic questions. No shell casings, no dragging trails leading in or out, no shoe prints matching adult male boots within 50 feet of the perimeter. Whoever left them there walked in without trace, or, more likely, backtracked through a separate route. The layout was too clean. One senior FBI profiler remarked, "This wasn't someone panicking. This was someone walking through a checklist." By 5:01 p.m., June 3rd, all major law enforcement agencies were aligned. Travis Caleb Decker was the prime suspect in a triple homicide investigation. But still, no confirmed sighting, no confirmed exit, no flight record. His banking activity was zero. His license plate had not pinged any toll systems. His last verified act was parking that truck. And yet nothing about the recovery scene aligned with emotional chaos. The positioning, the restraint type, the absence of fingerprints. It resembled something you'd find in a law enforcement training scenario, not in a remote forest. A civilian hiker posted a video that evening showing a long exposure shot of Rock Island Creek from May 31st. In the background, a single silhouette crossed a footbridge. The timestamp matched the early estimate of death. Investigators isolated the video. The figure was too small for ID, but the direction of travel led away from the creek, not toward it. It was subtle, but one thing stood out. The subject never looked back. By June 4th, the manhunt began in earnest. By the morning of June 4th, 2025, the case had crossed a line. What began as a missing persons report had evolved into a federal triple homicide investigation. But with no living suspect in custody and no direct eyewitnesses to the crime, the FBI shifted focus to behavioral profiling and institutional oversight. If the perpetrator had indeed planned this event in advance, then the answer to how it happened wasn't just forensic, it was systemic. Agents from the Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, began reviewing every available document on Travis Caleb Decker. His military service records, his custody filings, psychological evaluations, employment history, and digital communications were all subpoenaed. The goal wasn't just to establish motive. The goal was to determine whether this outcome had been predictable and preventable. Decker's military file was unremarkable in its structure. He completed basic training in 2012, later serving in short deployments with the National Guard. He passed SEER school, earned intermediate commendations, and exited service with an honorable discharge in 2017. But within 2 years of discharge, he had 2 documented incidents of reported instability, one involving a public altercation outside a pharmacy, another flagged in a psychological self-assessment submitted to a VA clinic in Spokane. In that report, Decker cited difficulty sleeping, impulsive aggression, and a persistent fear that his children would be taken away. He never followed up with assigned care. His appointment history showed a single intake, then no further contact. When asked to attend family counseling sessions during divorce proceedings in 2022, he declined participation. Court transcripts from the custody hearings showed that Whitney Decker, his ex-wife, repeatedly expressed concern over his emotional volatility and what she described as paranoid episodes. At least 2 affidavits were submitted in 2023, requesting limited contact and supervised visitation. Both were denied. The court found insufficient evidence to restrict visitation under Washington state law, which required a substantiated act of danger or criminal history. Whitney had documented her warnings, emails to her attorney, formal declarations to the court, even text messages sent directly to Travis, begging him to maintain medication compliance and therapy appointments. In one message submitted as part of the court record, she wrote, "I'm not trying to take the girls from you. I'm trying to keep you in their lives the right way." Law enforcement reviewed this communication and concluded that there had been ample warning signs, but nothing, at least on paper, qualified as a legal red flag under the system in place. In short, the structure failed, not by accident, but by omission. As part of the investigative process, Whitney consented to a forensic audit of her personal records. Investigators collected over 600 emails, calendar logs, and shared custody exchange details spanning 3 years. They uncovered consistent punctuality from Travis in all exchanges until May 2025. He had never missed a pickup or return time, never made threats, and never previously deviated from the agreement. That pattern mattered. It suggested one of two things. Either his behavior was masking deterioration, or the deviation was purposeful. Preparation, not collapse. His financials were equally stable. Bank activity showed regular employment income, minimal debt, and routine payments for groceries, utilities, and minor purchases. No large withdrawals, no ticket purchases, no weapon sales. But one anomaly stood out. 3 weeks before the children disappeared, Travis made 3 separate purchases from hardware stores: zip ties, duct tape, and clear plastic bags. The receipts were digital. The total was under $50 and no items were classified as restricted or suspicious. Legally, these transactions were invisible, but viewed post-crime, they painted a different picture. The real insight came through his internet search history, extracted from a backup cloud account investigators accessed through a residual login saved on an old laptop recovered from a friend's home. Among common queries, DIY truck maintenance, fishing permits, children's board games, were the following entries. How long can a child survive in the woods? Signs of trauma in kids after divorce. How to shut down GPS tracker permanently. Best places to disappear in Pacific Northwest. How to cross into Canada without documents. The timestamps corresponded with the final week of May. No searches appeared after May 30th. Investigators suspected Travis had intentionally disabled all location data thereafter. Every electronic footprint ceased on the night he picked up his daughters, and yet he hadn't deleted the search logs. That detail left room for interpretation. Was it carelessness or part of a script he wanted someone to find? In parallel, the FBI's victimology team conducted psychological autopsies, not of the suspect, but of the situation. What warning signs had been ignored not because they were hidden, but because they were subtle? What institutional decisions allowed a high-risk profile to continue receiving unsupervised child access? A senior analyst summarized it like this. If you input every variable from this file, service history, instability, failed therapy compliance, custody resistance, into a risk algorithm today, it would trigger a yellow alert. In 2022, it wouldn't have triggered anything. The laws hadn't kept pace, and in that delay, 3 children lost their lives. From a forensic standpoint, Chapter 3 provided more than backstory. It provided context for access. The investigation was now focused on understanding the planning window and examining every overlooked pattern that had allowed the crime to unfold without detection. Emotionally, it opened a deeper wound, because every system involved had been warned. The failure wasn't just that Travis disappeared, it was that no one had intervened before he made that possible. By June 5, 2025, investigators had already built the outline of a premeditated crime. Now they needed precision. The vehicle, Travis Decker's gray Dodge Ram, was no longer just a point of disappearance. It was the only sealed environment between the suspect and the victims before all 3 children were found dead. The truck wasn't just evidence, it was a container of sequence. The FBI Evidence Response Team, ERT, began a tiered forensic sweep. First, a baseline scan for biologicals, presumptive tests for blood, saliva, skin cells, and touch DNA. Second, fiber and trace collection. Third, latent print development using both powder and cyanoacrylate fuming. The priority wasn't to find overwhelming volume, it was to find order, what had been touched, when, and how. The driver's seat showed minor wear, no signs of forced entry or impact. Foot pedals registered uniform soil residue, consistent with the Pine Flats region near the Rock Island site. Swabs collected from the steering wheel and shift knob returned partial matches for Travis Decker. Expected. No anomaly. But the front passenger seat told a different story. Under the seat, lodged deep in the seat rail, was a broken crayon. Red, non-branded. Chipped on one side. DNA testing would later match it to Peyton, the eldest. No child restraint seat had been buckled into that position. Her booster was in the rear. The implication was movement. A moment when someone unbuckled, shifted forward, dropped something, and wasn't put back in the same place. Investigators focused on the rear cabin. All three booster seats were anchored, but only two showed recent compression patterns. Using pressure mapping and UV trace, techs determined that Olivia's seat had not been used after 7 p.m. May 30th. There was no skin oil, no smudging, no weight pressure. The seat was cold in every sense, but she had been seen alive at pickup. This suggested a significant timeline break inside the vehicle itself. Something happened before they ever reached the campsite. The center console revealed another detail. Beneath the false bottom tray, a single latex glove rolled inward. No prints, no biological residue, but it had been manufactured in a discontinued batch from a bulk distributor used by two hardware chains. The purchase record, eventually matched through serial box codes, corresponded to a store near Spokane, bought with a debit card linked to Travis's account. Dated May 15, 2025. That same purchase included zip ties. This detail mattered not because it proved anything in isolation, but because it eliminated spontaneity. No one buys gloves 2 weeks early for a routine camping trip with children. A digital forensics specialist cloned the truck's infotainment system. Although the system had been reset, data fragments were recoverable. A voice command log was retrieved through volatile memory reconstruction. On May 30th at 6:22 p.m., the system had registered the phrase, "Find nearest gas station." At 6:34 p.m., it responded with a chevron 12 miles west. No further entries were logged. Fuel receipts confirmed the vehicle was filled at that chevron. Surveillance footage had already shown Travis entering alone. All three girls remained unseen inside the truck. That window between 6:30 and 7:15 now appeared to be a critical hour. Temperature sensors inside the vehicle cabin had also logged heat fluctuation. The rear cabin dropped sharply between 7:05 and 7:40 p.m. Internal sensors showed at least one rear door was opened for 90 seconds and then not opened again. No airflow, no temperature rise. That kind of cooling indicated door exposure during outdoor transfer. It wasn't definitive, but it narrowed sequence. Even the windshield washer fluid mattered, tested and matched to a winter-grade blend not sold after March in Washington state. The vehicle hadn't been washed recently. Whatever transfer occurred, dust, soil, pollen, had been retained on contact points. Cross-reference with botanic markers collected from the children's clothing revealed two specific matches. Douglas fir needles and soil containing traces of oxidized iron, consistent with trailside runoff near Dry Creek Loop, the very place the bodies had been found. Forensics is not about discovering everything. It's about eliminating what didn't happen until what remains has only one logical thread. In this case, the absence of blood was not a gap. It was a choice. The absence of clutter was not luck. It was orchestration. What agents found most striking, however, was not the presence of trace, but the absence of chaos. No defensive marks, no last-minute disruption. The cabin of the vehicle was controlled, sterile, quiet. A senior evidence tech noted, "You'd expect at least one misplaced object. Something kicked over, something dropped. It looked staged, and it was. But it was staged through a mission." As of June 6th, the FBI concluded the vehicle itself had been part of the method. Not just transport, not just concealment. It had been the primary location of submission, where power was taken and silence began. By June 7, 2025, 4 days after the discovery at Dry Creek, law enforcement's priorities shifted from evidence preservation to manhunt protocol. Travis Decker had vanished without trace, and the silence surrounding his exit was no longer just concerning. It was tactical. The site, the truck, the children's bodies, it had all been left behind deliberately. What hadn't been left behind was Travis himself. A federal task force led by the U.S. Marshals Service, with assistance from the FBI and Washington State Patrol, established a coordinated perimeter search expanding from Rock Island Campground outward by 10 miles. Known ingress and egress points, ranger-monitored trails, and river pathways were each assigned to separate tracking teams equipped with thermal drones, K-9 units, and ground-penetrating radar in case of covert sheltering. But the landscape worked against them. The region between Leavenworth and the Alpine Lakes wilderness offered dense forest, sharp elevation, and hundreds of unmonitored trailheads. Decker's background in SEER training now factored into tactical modeling. He didn't need to leave tracks. He knew how to erase them. Cell tower data remained useless after May 30th. His phone had either been destroyed or disabled beyond recovery. His bank account stayed frozen. There were no credit charges, no flagged IDs, no bus or rail activity tied to his license or known aliases. He hadn't stolen a vehicle. He hadn't rented one either. The digital world provided no update. That left physical search. A civilian trail cam located 3 miles from the campground flagged a single frame at 4:41 a.m. on June Mershra. A lone figure facing away, moving east toward the Wenatchee River. The quality was poor, no face, no clothing identifiers. But the direction matched one possible escape model. Investigators cross-referenced that timestamp with river flow and floodplain data. If Decker had entered the river system, it was possible he moved north, undetected, using debris clusters and low light to his advantage. 2 volunteers later reported a possible sighting near Tumwater Canyon, a man alone wearing mismatched gear, carrying no bag. The report was logged, but no visual confirmation followed. Still, it was enough to redirect aerial search. For 72 hours, helicopters scanned the valley. No heat signatures, no movement, no campsite remains. The lack of trail was its own trail. At the federal level, Decker was now listed in the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, under Category 1, armed and dangerous. His veteran status triggered additional support from military liaisons. A prior firearms registration was reviewed. No current weapon had been purchased legally, but his training covered improvised methods and extended survival. Agents began to theorize a fallback plan. If Decker had moved toward Canada, there were limited choke points he could use without identification. But the terrain north of Okanogan County, steep, cold, and unmonitored, was survivable only with preparation. His internet search history, already flagged in Chapter 3, had included exact GPS coordinates near the Canadian border. That led to suspicion of pre-buried gear or staged supply drops. A long-range drone was sent to scan the area in question. It found nothing conclusive, just brush, fallen branches, rock, no heat, no motion. But as one agent remarked quietly, people like this don't need a trail. They just need time. And time was working in his favor. By June 9, 2025, public silence around the case had shattered. 3 dead children, a fugitive father, a trail that ended in forest and fog. But while investigators pursued tactical angles and forensic leads, the voice that reshaped the narrative wasn't from law enforcement. It was from the one person who had seen this coming. Whitney Decker didn't step in front of cameras for sympathy. Her first appearance was not through a press conference, but through an open letter, released to media outlets and pinned to the Chelan County Courthouse bulletin board. It wasn't polished. It wasn't written by an attorney. But it was clear. She had warned the system, and the system hadn't moved. The letter detailed her attempts over 2 years to restrict unsupervised visitation. She cited specific incidents: emotional volatility, medication noncompliance, passive-aggressive threats. In 2024, she had submitted 2 affidavits requesting mental health reassessment before continued custody exchanges. Both were dismissed for insufficient cause. Her letter included excerpts, word for word, from emails she sent to case evaluators. Some dated back to 2023. The tone was not dramatic, it was procedural, concerned, documented. The public reaction was immediate. Local media began re-examining the family court decisions. A Chelan County reporter uncovered that over 60% of child custody disputes involving psychological risk had no court-mandated evaluations unless a criminal charge had already occurred. The law wasn't broken, it was simply too slow. National outlets picked up the story: MSNBC, CBS. Even NPR ran a segment under the title, "Warnings That Weren't Enough: The Decker Case and Family Court Gaps." The framing wasn't theoretical anymore. 3 girls were dead. Their mother had tried to stop it. She had followed procedure. She had filed paperwork. She had played by the rules, and none of it mattered. Lawmakers responded. A bipartisan proposal, informally called Whitney's Clause, was introduced in the Washington state legislature by June 15th. It aimed to fast-track psychological evaluations when parents raised repeat concerns tied to documented mental health decline. The bill had not passed yet, but the momentum was real. Whitney, for her part, avoided interviews. She released no further statements. Her attorneys confirmed she had no intent to file civil claims at the time. There was no lawsuit, no GoFundMe, no press tour. She had said what she needed to say, but the public didn't forget. At a memorial held June 12th at Walla Walla Park, over 800 people attended. No speeches, no media, just names: Payton, Evelyn, Olivia, printed on white candles arranged along the riverbank. In the background, a recording played of the girls singing during a 2024 school event. It lasted 90 seconds. Then silence. In criminal cases, attention usually follows the suspect, the fugitive, the one who escapes. But in this case, the weight shifted. It wasn't about where Travis went next. It was about why no one stopped him before he got the chance. By June 14, 2025, the tone inside the command center had shifted. The forensics were done. The search grid had collapsed into diminishing returns. And the media coverage, now national, had outpaced investigative leads. The question was no longer what happened. It was where Travis Decker went next, and whether he was still alive to be found. The working theory, formalized by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, was that Travis had planned for a remote exit. Not a vehicle escape, not a friend's cabin, but a solo overland movement, potentially targeting the U.S.-Canada border through low surveillance terrain. It wasn't speculation. Digital evidence from Chapter 3 had already linked his search history to coordinates within Okanagan County, near Poseidon Wilderness. That detail shaped the next phase. A new team was deployed from the U.S. Border Patrol Tactical Unit, BORTAC, working alongside federal agents in a long-range wilderness tracking configuration. They began by identifying unofficial trails, known only to experienced hunters, smugglers, and off-grid hikers. At least 5 access paths were flagged based on terrain familiarity, survivability potential, and alignment with Travis's last known preparations. Surveillance drones launched from Tonasket and Concanully scanned for irregular thermal movement. They covered 60 square miles in the first 48 hours. Nothing definitive, just minor heat clusters, deer, possibly bear. A minor anomaly west of Horseshoe Basin was followed up on foot. The location showed signs of temporary human shelter, pine branches woven for insulation, ashes buried 6 inches deep, no food waste, no paper, no personal effects. A forensic sample was lifted from the buried ash, burned synthetic fibers consistent with military-issue base layer clothing. It wasn't a confirmation, but it was enough to reclassify the search zone. Back in Wenatchee, local residents continued reporting potential sightings. A gas station clerk in Twisp claimed to have seen a man matching Travis's build buying trail mix and water on June 11th. Security footage showed the transaction, but the man's face was obscured by a cap and beard. No purchase card, no phone, no voice. There was no way to confirm it, but law enforcement didn't dismiss it. By now, the lack of definitive sightings was a pattern of its own. There were no mistakes, no loud movements. Every potential appearance was low resolution, quiet, passive, controlled, not hiding in plain sight, just staying one step outside of detection. A secondary analysis from NORAD surveillance systems cross-referenced aerial data from the Cascades region. There were no flagged infrared readings consistent with a long-term human shelter. But one anomaly stood out: an unregistered movement pattern through a dead communication corridor between Cathedral Peak and the Ashnola River. The reading didn't persist. It was there for 47 minutes, then gone. Agents responded by shifting satellite coverage into narrow-angle tracking. Still, there was no follow-up confirmation. The movement, if human, left no thermal residue, no DNA, no items, just a disruption in stillness. By June 17th, a second wave of trackers, including former U.S. Forest Service rangers, was activated to sweep the southern edge of the border on foot. Some of these men had served in the same terrain during wildfire containment years earlier. They described the topography as almost designed to erase footprints: deep soil, pine debris, meltwater runoff. One ranger summarized the challenge: "He's either across already, or he's in terrain we can't touch without him wanting to be found." The investigation did not declare Travis Decker deceased. No body, no weapon, no surrender. He remained federally wanted, status unchanged. But operational resources were reduced. Public alert systems were scaled back. The official phrase was transitioning to passive surveillance. Unofficially, most understood what that meant. The trail had gone cold. By July 1st, 2025, it had been over 6 weeks since Travis Decker vanished from public sight, suspected of one of the most grotesque familial crimes in Washington state history. Despite an extensive manhunt across county, state, and even federal jurisdictions, no arrest had been made. Authorities confirmed he had not crossed into Canada. Border surveillance returned nothing. His last known digital footprint, a ping from a cell tower near a remote hiking trail in Kittitas County, was followed by silence. No further financial activity, no license plate captures, no third-party sightings. It was as if the earth swallowed him. For the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office, as well as the Washington State Patrol and FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, the lack of an arrest stalled more than just justice. It complicated everything that comes after. Without a defendant, the state couldn't proceed with formal charges or even a preliminary hearing. Though Travis was named the prime suspect in the triple homicide of his daughters, ages 2, 5, and 6, he had not been indicted. The prosecutorial team made a calculated decision not to pursue a murder indictment without custody, citing strategic reasons and the risk of compromising future admissibility of evidence. Under Washington law, murder charges cannot be tried in absentia. The system grants even the worst suspects the right to face their accusers and to defend themselves. Without Decker in custody, the entire criminal process sat suspended. What that meant, functionally, was that Whitney Decker, the mother of the victims, would not see a courtroom, not hear opening statements, not witness a verdict, not unless and until her husband was found. Despite this procedural halt, the case was not idle. On June 14, 2025, Travis Decker was added to the FBI's most wanted list, flagged as an armed and dangerous fugitive suspected of multiple counts of first-degree murder and child endangerment. His profile was circulated through the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, and his photo appeared on billboards in 6 states. In addition, Interpol issued a blue notice, enabling international tracking if he attempted to flee abroad. But the lack of formal legal closure presented psychological and procedural dilemmas. For Whitney Decker, this absence of conclusion became a new form of torment, what psychologists refer to as ambiguous loss. There had been no trial, no public cross-examination, no formal opportunity to confront the man who had, in a matter of minutes, annihilated their family. The horror of the crime was permanent, but the justice system's response was suspended in time. In late June, a local legislator, Representative J. Morales of Kittitas County, introduced a proposal for what would be known as Whitney's Bill. Legislation aimed at expediting protective interventions for families who report domestic and mental health risks involving firearms. The bill proposes that judges be granted more flexible authority to remove weapons from individuals flagged for violent ideation, even before physical violence has occurred. The bill gained bipartisan interest, spurred by outrage over the ignored warning signs in the Decker household. Beyond lawmaking, the victim's legacy found roots in quieter soil. On June 20, 2025, the Ellensburg City Council approved the renaming of a small children's playground near the Yakima River to the Decker Sisters Garden. The plaque bore only first names, Avery, Ahila, and Delilah. No mention of the crime, no inscription about the father, just the girls, frozen in the community's memory in their own right. Several local schools launched educational initiatives under the title Listen When They Speak, referring to the importance of taking reports of mental distress, domestic conflict, and behavioral red flags seriously, even when those reports come from within the home. A classmate's mother, who had once hosted the Decker girls for a birthday party, told a local paper, "They smiled like any other kids, and we failed them by thinking everything was fine because no one screamed for help out loud." Even in death, the 3 girls changed the landscape around them, but Travis Decker remained at large, and that one unresolved variable loomed over every effort at closure. Legally, the case remained open. The autopsy reports, though complete, could not be presented in a courtroom. Forensic pathologists detailed in full the mechanism of death for each child, Manual strangulation, likely occurring in sequential order. There were signs of sedation prior to death, consistent with the empty vial of prescription clonazepam found in the master bathroom, a drug for which Travis held a prescription. The coroner's office formally ruled the deaths as homicide, and their findings were filed with the state. But again, the absence of a charged party rendered much of the evidence procedurally inert. In the public discourse, this led to a quiet but heavy question. How does a community grieve when no one is sentenced? In most cases, the conclusion of a trial allows for closure, even if imperfect. Here, the absence of any courtroom resolution meant the horror lived on in a liminal space, confirmed but not addressed. And perhaps that's what made this case feel uniquely haunting. It wasn't just about what was lost. It was about what was never finished. In the end, this case is more than a tragedy. It's a warning. As someone who's seen what silence can cost, I've learned that ignoring the red flags, no matter how subtle, can have irreversible consequences. If someone close to you is showing signs of instability or violence, don't wait. Speak up. Protect your loved ones, even when it's uncomfortable. We often assume the worst can't happen in our own homes, but that's exactly where it hides. What do you think? Should our laws do more when families report early warning signs? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between protecting yourself or keeping the peace? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment and share your thoughts, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this video, I'd still love to know why and where you're tuning in. Either way, don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more true stories that matter.